This is Cosby for Symptom. I'm your host, James Carner. With me is Jack Pendergrass, who is a researcher, artist, an alienated father who is exposing non-government organizations like the military industrial complex's non-government organization called Maximus Inc. Jack, welcome to the show.
Hello, hello. Thank you.
Thank you for being with me. Jack, tell me a little bit about how you got into finding this Maximus company.
I think a lot of us have how we're kind of put on these, these paths, so to speak, about researching, we have something personal come up, right? I know a lot of people who like research the different areas of law, outside of being like, a bar association attorney or lawyer. A lot of people have like run-ins with the police and, different people in law enforcement. So, my story is not unlike a lot of people. I got into Maximus after going through the family court and child support system. So that's I was going through some mail actually from I had received from the local child support administration. I noticed a change in the letterhead, and it was that simple. I went from state of Tennessee child support enforcement to Maximus child support enforcement. That little snippet of information is, how we arrived here today. That was in, I guess 2014, I guess now 2015, somewhere in there. So it's approaching, at least the 10-year mark.
Mm-hmm.
But I had been introduced to a lot of bad actors and companies and things like that just through the through the work I've done over the years. I was a batch process chemical operator for, I guess, about a decade. So early on, I was introduced to DuPont, some of the local companies that had been bought out by transnational corporations, and subsequently ended up working for 2 or 3 more of those chemical companies. Now it seems unrelated, but if you do the research, you find out that these chemical companies are in bed with big pharma, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Big pharma is in bed with the insurance companies. So they're all involved in the legalized child trafficking and illegal child trafficking systems. Maximus is pretty much at the center of a lot of that in the United States. I'd say they pretty much the purveyor of legalized child trafficking. They maintain, and they always will, a stance of they're a corporation serving the government. When in fact, I mean, if you do enough research, like we have, you find that Maximus is pretty much privatized most of your government. So we don't have a government; we have a corporation masquerading as a government, right? So it gets deep very quickly when we start talking about these things.
Okay, so to take a step back so the audience understands really what we're talking about, Maximus Inc. is a for-profit corporation who back in the 90s sealed the first contract with Los Angeles County in order to control the county offices, certain departments like welfare. And that took it away from the state. The state ended up paying them to do that job. And with that, the problem that I see is if it's a for-profit company, they're going to want money every year and growth, et cetera, especially if they have shareholders, which Maximus Inc. does have shareholders. They're listed on the stock exchange. So from there, they have access to, just if we just talk about Los Angeles, all of Los Angeles's counties records of individuals when it comes to the welfare system. And it doesn't stop there, because they also contract now into other sectors. And so with that, this company has amassed a wealth of information about individuals and computer software that can analyze and interpret situations programmatically versus on a human heart level. Therefore, if it's not profitable to help one person or another, then this company's computers will say, move on, let them deal with it. Because because what corporations do when it comes to being sued, if they get sued and they make more money by doing whatever deed that they did in order to get sued, if the process of being sued is less money than how much they make, then they go for it all the way, because those are the numbers. That's exactly the numbers. Now, if you look at it from an insurance company standpoint, they do the exact same thing. They will analyze and interpret a situation of, let's say, a car manufacturer and a problem that they're having with their car, and they will adjust and make sure that they make more profit if they allow the car manufacturer to continue, or if it'll cost more money to just pull it and redo all of the parts again. So when it comes to private corporatocracy, we don't have a human level connection between us and our government. We now have a corporation connection to government, which bypasses what I would consider just human emotion, because it's for profit. It's not for the people. And therefore, that is a conflict of interest when it comes to the American taxpayers paying their taxes in order to have a corporation that makes money off of you. That doesn't seem right. Is that what you were kind of seeing as you went through this research?
Yeah, yeah. And I think those are very, very good points that you bring up, where it's profits over people. The people are the chattel, right? They're the we can think of it in terms of banking, where people are the currency. Maximus is the bank. They're using people as the currency, and in extortion, exploitation, any of those terms that you want to label, but the people are being exploited to a degree that they don't even realize. And and I can include myself in that group, because initially I had no clue. Um, my initial journey into it was just on the child support perspective. So then I got to thinking, okay, like, well, we have Maximus at this, at the center of the child support system, foster care system, um, welfare to work, all these programs that they privatized. So where did all that come from? And then you get to looking deeper and deeper, and you find out that this is a product of the military industrial complex.
Hmm.
And for those who don't know, the military-industrial complex is a product of the Vatican and the Jesuits, and the black nobility families that came out of Italy, who were the Canaanites. So what we're looking at are pieces of the beast system that we read in Scripture. There again, it gets really deep, really quickly. So then, we have this 40,000 foot view, so to speak. So then we have to pull these things out of the ether, so and then find our focus. So
okay, let's take a step back. Let's take a step back. Sorry to interrupt, but I want to make sure that, because we could go off on a whole rabbit hole, and I'd rather take a step back to Maximus and how it affected you personally. So as you get your information about child support, explain to us what you're trying to achieve with child support. Is it, were you told that you have to pay a certain amount, and then Maximus came in and said they wanted more? How did it affect you?
So let's examine Title 40 for a moment. It's that was created. Title 40 was written into the Social Security Act of 1975. The same year Maximus was founded. That is not coincidental or happenstance. So what Title 4D was, what we're told, and what they still push to the public, is that Title 4D was to aid the states in welfare recovery. It's a welfare recovery plan, is what they purport, right? So that came on the heels of equal rights during the 60s and 70s, but originally child support was, in the United States, what we know of the modern iteration was created in the 50s for wartime, for women who were losing their spouses in the world wars. So then we fast forward back up to the 70s. So what happened in the 70s? Well, we had Roe versus Wade in 73. I believe it was Vanguard, who was founded in 73 or 74, Maximus in 75. But you have all this legislation and social welfare reform in the 70s. David Mastron, the founder of Maximus, was basically, his company laid the blueprints for privatization. So that being said, what they were doing, and I was the poster child for what these companies do to poor people, or just your working class person. My daughter's mother, her family is very wealthy. That influenced every decision they were making to extract more money from me. And it's almost it's not almost, it's a kids for cash scheme, basically. You pay this amount, we'll let you see your child. You don't pay this amount, well, we're going to inflict everything we can upon you. And that happened to me. I didn't get to see my daughter. I was alienated systematically by the magistrates, and even by the head judge of the juvenile court, quote unquote court, here in Chattanooga. They all knew the family, and they don't even follow their own court rules and procedures, courtroom rules and procedures. When in actuality they're not courts at all. They're all listed on Dun and Bradstreet. They have business numbers.
Corporations.
Yeah, all corporations. But you don't know this, and they're not going to tell you, because for you to remain ignorant is to their advantage.
Right.
At one point, I was paying in more child support than my daughter's mother was making at her job. Um, the highest I was paying monthly for child support was for one child that I got to see 3 hours a week after she and I separated. Um, and there again, the attorneys that she had at her disposal were all collecting fees from the 4D program. To give everybody an idea of like how much money these programs collect, for every dollar that Tennessee spends for their welfare programs, they're getting back from the federal government almost $6. Texas is getting somewhere around $12 to $13 for every dollar they spend. There's a whole system of enhancements so that the more child support a state collects, the more they get in federal funding. The judges and magistrates' pensions, your sheriff's office, your police, everybody is getting paid out of these funds that are coming out of Social Security. So when people say, the Social Security system is failing or there's not going to be any money, it's because of programs like this. You and I both, and anybody who will be watching this, is paying for these legalized child trafficking systems that originate in that 1975 Social Security Act. The way they are supposed to compute these amounts that you're supposed to pay, and this is where it gets messed up. Each state is responsible for their own child support system. Higher performing states get more federal incentives. So they're supposed to basically do an average of what you and the custodial parent make in a year, and it's based off a percentage. Now that can go up or down. Let's say I go into the program making say minimum wage. So then as time goes by, I do better and better and get higher paying jobs. Well, they pull you in for a hearing and say, well, you're making this now, so now we can impose this much more on you. And that happened to me. At one point, I was paying over $1,100 a month for my daughter. But there again, it's supposed to be based on parenting time, insurance, and all these expenditures that I'm supposed to be, meeting the custodial parent kind of at the halfway point, right? Couldn't be further from the truth. Like I was paying for most of everything for my daughter, while she was living with her mother. But they take the fact that she's living with her mother and use that as the basis for part of her, her income, right? She's paying for rent, she's paying for this, that, and the other. So yeah, when all was said and done, I ended up losing my license probably a half dozen, maybe 7 or 8 times, which you have to pay to get it reinstated. Which
contractor license, right? Or your driver's license?
Driver's license.
Okay.
But the thing is, like, if you are, let's say you're a doctor and you're behind on your child support, they can pull your medical license. The only people they can't or really don't touch are the attorneys.
Okay,
So,
so of that $1,300 you were paying monthly to Maximus, how much was your ex-wife receiving out of that?
she was getting most of it, she was getting a large percentage of it. But the thing is, Maximus was given a no bid contract in Tennessee to run the child support system.
Mm-hmm.
So they have that contract.
No bid,
Then
meaning they
for
had no other competition, just they gave it straight to them. Nobody else
just gave it,
asked for the bid. They
yeah,
got the bid, etc. Okay.
right. And another statistic is, Maximus has or currently runs child support systems in all 50 states, including U.S. territories, including Guam, American Samoa, um, and some of those other territories. And that's the thing is Maximus holds a monopoly on all that. So not only do they get the contracts, and it comes through ultimately through on the federal level from Health and Human Services in D.C. Then it's passed down to the state, and then the state says, okay, here's our contractor. Now we can post bids, but we know this company is going to give us the most return, and that's what they're looking for is ROI, return on investment. So Maximus is usually the default company corporation that they go to. So in addition to the contracts, which are always massive,
They
I
send
did
you a
some.
contract. Maximus sent you a contract.
No, it's through HHS, through the local child support courts. They pull you in from, if it's not already established at birth, and there was contention between, if my daughter was mine or not, so I had to go through myself and another gentleman had to go through another test, a DNA test to determine, who was the father.
Who made the decision to do the DNA test?
The state, because they were looking to start collecting child support.
So was it obvious between you and your ex-wife that it was your daughter? Why would there
Yes,
be a need to get a DNA test other than to profit off of it?
right. It was, gosh, it was much, much, much later. I found out that the other fellow had, he was tested that week.
What do you mean, other
Um,
fellow? What does that mean?
there, like I said, it was between me and another guy who was the father.
Oh, so you didn't know.
I didn't know, not 100%,
Okay.
So, and that's where things went really haywire. So she didn't want to get, she didn't want to do amniocentesis or anything of that nature, which I understand. I wouldn't want to compromise anybody's child. Um, the other side of that coin is for those 18 months from the time my daughter was born till I had the DNA test. They took 18 months based on the job that I had at the time at DuPont, and at the time they were doing, and they still do child support arrears, and they can do that retroactively. They can go back 3 to 5 years, I think. They went back 18 months. So at the first child support hearing, I ended up $12,000 in arrears without even having previously stepped inside any kind of administrative hearing or anything like that. And that was written into the child support system. So these programs, the legislation, Maximus is directly influenced. Not only do they get the contracts, but and I really had to dig to find this statistic in a contract. Not only was Maximus being given the contracts, but for all the child support that was being collected, they were getting 9% of that. right
Okay,
off the top.
9%. All right.
So you're talking, you know, tens of millions of dollars. And in some of the larger states, I think Texas is probably your best example to see how exorbitant these contracts are. I think Texas collects 60 to 70 million in just child support
Mm-hmm.
every year. That's excluding the foster care and welfare and all these other programs that Maximus has directly influenced. They influence the legislation. You know, they lobby like most corporations do to get laws passed, or so that bills become laws. And so that was my introduction to Maximus. It was it was very hard, very long, very arduous.
Did you have to get a lawyer
Um,
while you're going through all of this?
I did once in when I walked into the hearing. Um, Not more than 5 minutes, the state's attorney looked at my lawyer and me and said, "Well, if he can afford an attorney, he can afford more child support." So you see how, you know, for those who've been through this, you know, they know how it works to a degree. I've really dug into the 4D system, and a lot of parents have, you know, that have been through this. Um, but I think I'm the only one who identified that, and this is as far as I know, identified that that system was set up to help. At the time, before it became HHS, it was the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. um, the MK Ultra experiments were being partially funded by DHEW. When the when the child support and welfare legislation was written, it was written by Russell Long of Louisiana. Claudia Mullen, who gave testimony in one of the MK Ultra hearings, divulged that Russell Long was part of the MK Ultra experiments. He was one of the handlers. That took a long time to find. Um, so that entire system was set up to, one, provide test subjects for the government, because what happens in foster care? Those children are wards of the state, and they can be experimented on. So you have both foster care and child support funding those MK experiments in the 70s, 60s, and 70s. Fast forward to now, I mean, they're still funding. That was the entire premise, that they haven't told anybody about the child support and foster care system. Particularly, you know, foster care. Child support's just another mechanism for them to add to the states and the federal government's coffers.
Do you have the documentation to when you said you found the link between MK Ultra and the states giving over to privatization, and the children that are going missing? Do you have this information?
Yeah, I mean, I've got everything posted on my Twitter account, you know, Twitter or
Okay.
Telegram.
Okay.
Um, and I can, you know, I can make everything readily available, but everything's there. I don't delete anything, and I provide links, and you know, and I cite all my sources,
Mm-hmm.
so people can see the history of these things. And I would tell anybody, if you find any information that you think's incorrect or maybe needs to be amended, let me know. You know, I'm not above. You know, I don't think myself as beyond reproach. And I make mistakes. But this stuff, I'm pretty much 100% on. But there again, Um, I want everybody to read this without my influence and see if they draw the same conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my job, I think, as a researcher is to provide, evidence, um, speak the truth, and let people make the judgment for themselves. I'm not a social media influencer or anything of that nature. I'm a normal guy just trying to expose these systems and these corporations. The Privatization Act was very important because that Maximus was who privatized CPS, Child Protective Services.
Mm-hmm.
They privatized child support and welfare,
Mm-hmm.
and that involved they're called ALEC, ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council,
Hmm.
which includes a lot of these major food corporations, a lot of the military industrial corporations, um, a lot of the tech companies, big pharma. They're all part of the American Legislative Exchange Council, getting all these things passed. Um, through, there again, lobbying, paying people to look the other way. And that includes all these quote unquote federal agencies that we have, HHS, Department of Education, and so on and so forth. It's very strategic how they've placed everybody. And Maximus has placed employees in certain positions for that very reason, so they can influence senators, Congress, and despite what anybody thinks, every congressman, congresswoman, every senator, they know about Maximus, but nobody is speaking. I think they're scared because of, what you touched on earlier was, all the data collections that they, all the databases they have
And the
on every
breaches, the breaches.
the breaches. Like at a certain point, when do you say this was intentional? This information was released intentionally, and they're going to call it a data breach.
Right. Well, we don't know. There's no proof, but you know, if there's money in it, absolutely. If you get sued and you still make more money after being sued and paying all the wages, what's stopping someone from doing a data breach, especially if you're selling that data to China or Italy or Russia or who cares? All of that information can be used against the American people because it is the American people's information, and it should be ours. It should belong to us, especially our social security numbers, which when we were young and we were told in school to protect that number, keep it close, lock it up. Nobody knows that number. And now everybody has had their social security number leaked. Everybody and their information has been given to other countries that could use that information for nefarious purposes, including scams. They can now set up emails where they will know what banks you work with, what companies you work with, and basically they can send an email to you to make it look like it's from that bank or from that company, saying, "Hey, it's your local bank. We just had security thing. We need you to change your password." And then they go, "What's your old?" You think it looks like it, but nobody ever checks the actual domain name because they get busy or whatever. But regardless, selling information to other countries that are really good at scamming other countries is a profitable business. And so who knows what Maximus is capable of or what they have done. I can't put my finger down and say this is proof that this company is doing that. But what I can tell you is with that data breach alone, that should have been brought up to Congress and decisions should have been made. And maybe it did, because recently they had a $6.6 billion contract to do the call center for Medicaid. And they owned 1-800-Medicaid, and all of the call center employees were working under Maximus. And what's interesting, it was a 9-year contract. And for 9 years, they wanted $6.6 billion, which doesn't make any sense as far as how to operate a call center, how many calls come into the call center, and diverting and directing information from A to B should not cost in the billions. In the millions, absolutely, but in the billions, that doesn't make any sense, which tells me, just from a business person myself, something's not adding up. It should not cost almost $1 billion a year, like 700 million a year, to operate a call center. That makes absolutely no sense. So I'm looking at that as they could, I can't prove if they do or not, but they could be taking a big chunk of that and profiting off of this big time, and just, hire a bunch of people with minimum wage and simple software programs that can direct them on what to do. They don't have to do much at all, other than just be a voice on the call. And that, to me, is alarming, just those prices alone. So that raises major concerns for me. What are your thoughts on that?
I guess it's been about 2 years now, but we've become really good friends. Her name is Stacy Cisco. She's a dear friend to me. She worked for Maximus, and she worked for Maximus when they bought out the Veterans Administration, VES. So Stacy was working for VES when Maximus bought them out, which was, I think that was a $1.4 billion deal when they bought it. I think it was cash. Anyway, so Stacy worked for VES and subsequently Maximus when they bought them out, and Stacy became a whistleblower. So Stacy and I have been, exchanging information for a long time. A lot of stuff, we're releasing slowly because we have so much.
So you're working with Stacy hand in hand on this information?
Well, not exclusively Stacy, but for certain aspects of this, yes.
Because you said we, so I wanted to make sure.
Yeah. I say we because I've been blessed with, I've got several people I just trust implicitly, and we've been working on, before I was introduced to them, I was sitting with all this information for a long time, probably 5 or 6 years before I started releasing any information, because I knew the dangers of what could happen. Nancy Schaefer, senators have been killed over exposing CPS, child support, foster care systems. People have lost their lives. So I knew the volatility of what I was looking at. So, just slowly going through, being on social media, I established some really close friendships with a small group of people, who started looking at the information. I started putting out slowly, and they were like, you're correct. And there's of course been some corrections along the way that I've had to make, people steering me in the right direction, people who had worked in CPS or had been caseworkers for CPS. I've been really blessed in those friendships and their extensive knowledge, my niche is, Maximus, of course, and that. And there again, we're coming in, we have this broad range, and then, we're coming in to focus in all these different areas. Um, so yeah, Stacy and I've got Pamela Olson in California, my friend Tony Triano in Idaho. I think she just recently moved. Anyway, so it's a very, we're very tight knit group, and we've been researching this stuff for a long time. Um, Tony and Pam and I have been researching them um, collectively, probably around the 7 or 8 year mark, maybe
So a lot
somewhere
of
around
work
there.
has been done on this between you guys. A lot of
Tons,
work.
tons.
Now, what information did you or this team come across to where you could link them to the Black nobility groups?
There was a gentleman named Raymond, I believe he's still alive. A guy named Raymond B. Ruddy. Um, and it's interesting because I initially, I was using some AI programs, or just using like Grok, like in Chat GPT, just to put some feelers out there, some fishing expeditions, as it were, to see what these AI programs would come up with. And I knew who the founder of Maximus was. I knew his history. So then, I asked about Raymond B. Ruddy, and they said, I think it was Chat GPT, gave me back a response of Raymond B. Ruddy is the founder of Maximus. I was like, no, he's not. But Raymond is a prominent member of the Catholic Church, very prominent member. So then I started investigating him, and I did find direct ties to the Vatican. So as far as like the Black nobility families are concerned, and that could be an entire series on itself, right?
Yeah. But all you had to say was linked to the Catholic Church through this guy. That's it. I mean, the Catholic Church is not a church, it's a mafia, and it's being controlled by the Jesuits, as you were saying. The Jesuits, as I have mentioned to many people about this history, are from the land of Prussia that Russia took over, beat them up, and then told them to pick a new religion, and they chose Judaism. They're the Zionists currently that are trying to start a world war in order to keep Israel to be the number one world government, one world place. And all of it leads back to the Society of Jesus, and all of their tentacles are everywhere. And Maximus surprised me because I've never heard of this company at all until Urban brought it up and said that he was watching some of your information. That is quite fascinating. I definitely would like to get the full name of that guy you were talking about, because I don't know how to spell that. I would like to get that from you, and if you could give that to Urban or me, that would be great. I want to do research on that person, and I'm curious why AI said that this person's the owner of Maximus, because I was looking into partners. It doesn't say that he started partnering with anybody, but definitely he does have a board of directors I want to do some research on. But then on top of that, you mentioned something, or somebody's mentioned something, that his father, David, his father, the owner of Maximus, do you know much about his father and how there's a connection between him and MK Ultra?
Yes. So David's father was, David was Air Force. His father was Army, and he was actually in the Black Devils, the Devil's Brigade.
Hmm.
So his father was Colonel Joseph Lee Mastron.
Okay, so I was right in finding that guy. It was definitely
Yeah,
him. Okay. All
yeah.
right. And he
So it
did
was
like food radiation or something, which I thought was weird.
food irradiation. He spearheaded, like he was in charge of the Army Quartermaster program for food irradiation.
Right. Which is
So if
ionizing
you
food to make it last longer on shelves, which probably isn't good for the human health, by the way.
no, it isn't. And if you look at the food radiation, there were experiments. There were, food radiated food was given to children at like the Fernald School, and there were two Fernald schools. Those were sponsored by MIT and Quaker Oats, where they were feeding wards. There again, wards of the state.
Mm-hmm.
They were giving these kids,
Experimenting
yeah,
without consent.
radioactive isotopes in their food, and that's where it kind of goes dark on his father, because I found him listed. I'm going to have to pull some FOIAs, from
Sure.
the DTIC, and see if I can get a hold of any of his military records if they're willing to relinquish those, which they're probably not. But the food irradiation experiments was alarming, and then I came across a document, and it's on my Twitter account also. It's called Bad Taste. I can't remember who the author is, but the PDF's posted. But the author describes, the situation, where the WHO, the IAEC, and I think even the AEC here in the United States, they were denying all these test results that were coming back from how safe irradiated food was,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I got to thinking, is like, well, why would you deny those things if they were true? Well, it was because of the MK Ultra experiments. They didn't want anybody to know that another military program was being slowly, put out to the public. And this was in the 50s and 50s and 60s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, was, I think, his enlistment period. He was in there for a long time. So I've got some documents that I managed to find and printed out, but he's only mentioned in, three or four of the documents, and it's literally like Colonel Colonel Mastron, and that's the extent of mentioning him. So I had to look up his obituary, and even
Mm-hmm.
that was, gave me some limited information. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that's originally how I came across the food irrigation
Mm-hmm.
program he spearheaded. It was
Yeah.
so very limited. So yeah, if you dig into the MK experiments, and you will find food irradiation, plutonium injections,
Hmm.
things things like that, just absolute horror stories. One of the documents I found where it's mentioned they had a meeting in which is not far from Oak Ridge National Lab, which is where the first plutonium injection in the United States happened. They had a meeting in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And for those not familiar with the area, Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, it's not far from the North Carolina border where all the flooding is
Mm.
occurred, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as a side note, miraculously, nothing has happened to the Oak Ridge National Lab.
Right.
So, um, Oak Ridge was also one of two locations where the Manhattan Project was initially started. The uranium enrichment began at Oak Ridge and was later taken back out to Los Alamos and Alamogordo, and so there's that little tidbit of information for anybody who wants to dig.
Well,
Um,
now, if anybody understand, let's take a step back so the audience knows where we're going. Basically, Project Paperclip was a program between Russia and America. And the program was after World War II, when Germany was finally defeated, America and Russia split up the Nazi scientists that were experimenting on human beings, and also the Nazi scientists that were experimenting with exotic material and exotic aircraft. And America ended up getting the exotic aircraft like anti-gravity from the Nazi Bell, which we know this is documented. And but they didn't they America didn't really get most of the mind control people. It was Russia who got the mind control and human experimentation scientists. And so America, it took them a little bit longer to catch up with Russia and their experimentations with that way. But all of this stems from really the Nazism never went away. It was just split up between Russia and America. And Russia and America were both working for the Jesuits, because we know after the Bolshevik revolution, the families of Russia who were holding on as long as they could, well, they lost Russia to the bankers. So Russia and America have been used just as pawns to make it appear that we have a boogeyman. And just as Werner von Braun said, and he was one of the Nazi scientists that were taken from Germany, said that they always need a boogeyman in order to keep controlling people. So this whole thing is all about mind control and making money, hand in hand. There's just two things that our own government, taking orders from the Jesuits at the top, is mind control, keep controlling us, and getting rid of what I would consider to be the waste products of creating the exotic materials that they're currently making. And I believe that they have been slowly integrating that into our food system. And we became the vessels carrying the toxicity of what they usually would put underground. It's being put in our bodies because, logically, cheaply, that's the best way to go about it. And I believe that's what the American people have been suffering through. On top of the agreement back in 1992 that the United Nations did with themselves, was to all pollutants from all the countries were to be put back into the people via spraying it through aerosols or getting them to ingest it, et cetera, because that was their way of fighting, global warming at the time. So it's a huge story. And with that, Maximus is literally one of those branches that is fundamentally getting its fingers into the government structure and could use that power against the people, because they can justify, just by saying alone, we're just a private corporation. We're not a government agency. We were told that, to manage this thing. You can't blame us. And this is what evil companies and evil people do, is they skirt around subjects and make it so that they cannot be held accountable when they do get exposed. And that's what this show is all about. I'm about exposing companies like Maximus, trying to get to the bottom of what is the cause of all of this. What is the cause before the symptom? Because normally we're always fed by the media, who these bankers own, the symptoms, but we never can get to the cause. And I do believe the root cause has always been and always will be and will continue, even if they get thwarted, is a new world order. What are your thoughts on that?
uh, I completely agree. Completely agree. Um, it's biblical, in scale and scope. I mean, I would tell anybody, if you don't believe in scripture, you don't believe in God, and conversely, the devil, you will fail to see these things, and these horrors that you come across in deep research will break your faith if you don't have one. Let me restate that. If you have faith, it'll test it. If you don't have faith, it will break you. And that's where I've seen a lot of researchers fail. And I hate to see that. But you better be grounded in you know something higher than yourself, because you will I've seen people freak out over finding certain information, and I'm like, you really should be praying every day. You really should be reading your Bible. That's the only thing that's going to really prepare you to do these deep dives, to ask for wisdom and guidance and discernment. To me, is just of utmost importance. That way, you're prepared. You can look at things through that perspective, through a Christian world view. You're able to articulate these things that you see and read, and every little bit of information that we can confirm helps everybody. And it's important to reach out to other people who are like-minded. Right? You have to, and you have to have a support system. So that's why I'm thankful for you. Like having me on today, for all the people who have been involved. Have helped me. I thank God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit every day. What I mean ultimately is it tells you in Scripture, there is a beast system. And I think Maximus is a critical part of that beast system in the United States, bringing everything online, consolidating all these databases on everybody, all the information. We've seen them go, they become global, over the founding of the company. These are things that we have to be aware of, these individual pieces of the beast system. And
right, to be watchers on the wall.
Yeah. And we have to get the information out to whom we can, when we can, and who will listen. If you can't have these conversations with people, find people who will talk to you about it. That's what I've had to do. And it's not me being pompous or elitist or anything like that. It's like, no, I feel like I've been called to do this, to help children, to help the parents, to expose Maximus. And I think anybody who's been in this for a long time, or even recently, time frame doesn't matter. At some point, I think you feel a calling. You're like, I really feel like I should be here now, or doing something to further the conversations, to expose this. It's and every good researcher I've come across has felt that pull. And I think that's God saying, hey, I put you here for a time such as this. Get out there, preach the word, preach the truth, and help. I don't want to see anybody fail. I don't want to see anybody, in terms of the child support stuff, I don't want to see anybody go through that ever. Through those mechanisms, through the family courts and what have you. I lost custody of my daughter. All my parental rights are terminated. that's part of the beast system. They want to
Yeah.
strip you of anything of that nature. They don't
Yeah.
want you to have.
Yeah. All under profit. All under
Yeah.
profit. Well said, Jack. I really appreciate this time. We've been speaking with Jack Pendergrass, who is a researcher, artist, and alienated father. He's been exposing non-government organizations like the company Maximus Inc., which he thinks is related or linked directly to the military industrial complex. And we're trying to get to the bottom of this company and try to figure out what other things do they have control on top of what blowback is going to happen since their Move It data breach and who stole that data, which apparently it was supposed to be Russia, which I find hilarious. Well, Jack, thank you so much for being on the show. Everything that you said is spot on. I agree with you 100%. And my heart goes out to you and your daughter and your ex-wife and all that you guys are struggling to get through, just to, go through what we thought was a government organization now privately taken over for profit, which doesn't really make any sense as far as what we thought we were founding our country based on. And now what we see is just a corporatocracy, a fascist nation, and where we're headed, especially after the recent Hurricane Helena and the botched job that they're doing saving people's lives down there. We can already see that America seems to be lost and has been lost. And it's our job to get this information out there and help as many people as we possibly can. Jack, how can people get a hold of you?
I've got 2 Telegram channels. It's Maximus Disclosure, and Tony, whom I mentioned, Tony Triano. She and I had the Maximus 2.0 channel on Telegram. And you can find us both on Twitter. You can find all of our team links on our respective accounts. And I'm always thankful, and I'm always shouting out to people who have been there with me, supporting me. So we have a lot of great resources for people. It's nothing, we present nothing but the truth. We try to be personable, do our best to help somebody if they need it, steer them in the right direction. I have Facebook also, but I'm rarely on there anymore. I just kind of use it as a online storage site, more or less, anymore because of the right. Censorship,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's primarily we're on Twitter, Twitter and Telegram, and
okay, I'll put the links up so people can find it easier.
Yeah, Urban's got our our information, and yeah, I want to stay in contact with everybody. The more eyes we have on this stuff, the better off we all are.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Well, Jack, it's a pleasure meeting you. And thank you so much for coming onto the show, exposing Maximus. And I hope to have you on again very soon.
Yeah, thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
You got it.